Hello, my lovies, and welcome back to another fun stream. Yes, I'm wearing red in I don't know. It is probably Valentine's Day when you're watching this. I was called out because normally, apparently, I always wear black. Again, I don't want to keep blabbering on about this. We are here today and have an amazing and fun topic, which is quite underrated because yes, this is a story about war and but also about love. And let me introduce, or let him introduce himself. I don't think there's a soul out there that doesn't know him who's been on my channel before. But the lovely Dan from Voice of Geekdom today is here to talk about love in Tolkien with me. Dan.
Hello to the clueless fangirl viewers. Back once again. Here I am, and happy Valentine's Day from us to you. Happy Valentine's Day to the couples and to the single people.
Yay. And we don't want to make this cheesy or anything, and I think you don't need a day to celebrate love or friendship, or any other good things, but sometimes it's good to have a day and to just be, I see it as being reminded of the good things, right? And yeah, so as I said before, Tolkien, obviously the Lord of the Rings and all the other books there, yes, a story of wars and of falling of mankind and redemption and all the good things and of good versus evil. But it's also a story about love, and friendship can be love. It doesn't always have to be love between two people, men and men, women and women, women and men, whatever. And today we want to narrow it down a little bit because otherwise we could be talking for hours. But we want to talk about mainly the love between elves and humans, because this is very special in Tolkien, and there are not that many, it's not like Ents and Hobbits are known to have fallen in love in Tolkien's lore before, or any other, like dwarves and elves. No, that just happened in the Hobbit movie. We don't know of anything like that happened before. But yes, I do think, obviously there are cool couples of just humans, but I do think elves and humans is very special, and we're going to talk you through a few couples, some examples, and the different concepts of love Tolkien introduces in his lore, because it's not always, lovely-dovely and good and positive. There is also failed love, tragic love, lust, desire, and let's talk about that. I'm excited.
Me too.
Good.
So lead us. Where are we gonna start?
Yeah, Dan was like, "What are we talking about today?" No, I would say, and ask. This is what I in the past always ask in the beginning. What is like the most regarding the topic of love? What stands out to you the most, knowing a lot of Tolkien's lore? Like, what would you say? What is the main thing?
Like story point wise, you mean? I mean, the one that really massively stands out for the relevance that it has to Tolkien's own life, as we've talked about before on the show, is the Beren and Lúthien story, of course. Just the classic story from the Silmarillion of the elf maiden, elf princess of Doriath, who falls in love with the mortal Beren. In most versions of the story, he's mortal anyway. Yeah. There's an early version where he's an elf.
He was an elf before, yes, exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, that was the classic story, which is known to Lord of the Rings readers. Aragorn sings about it, and the storyline is echoed in his story as well with Arwen. And there are kind of echoes of this story throughout the legendarium, throughout history that we see. But that's really kind of like the main one that you go to when you think about this subject, I think. Yeah. And it's particularly relevant to Tolkien himself as well, because he based that character on his own wife, as we've said before. He was buried with the headstone of his grave saying Beren and Lúthien when he was buried with his wife. So
Yeah, unfortunately, we couldn't go. Dan and I have been in Oxford. I mean, I lived in Oxford for a while. I went to school there. But yeah, I showed Dan, the British person who hasn't been there, I showed him Oxford. And it was really cool. And we actually wanted to go there. But I think we didn't have that much time left. And the weather was really, really, I mean, typical British weather. And yeah, the weather was really bad. But yes, I've been there. And it's really cool and magical and beautiful. And yeah, in the gravestone of his wife and him, there's Beren and Lúthien engraved, which is really cool, and it just shows you how important, yes, obviously these two characters who in a way mirror what him and his wife went through, but also the importance of these books he did write. So, like engraving names of characters you develop and bring to life in your gravestone. Yes, I think that is, a pretty big thing. And yeah, maybe let's start there because there's a super cool quote. I always love to bring in quotes from Tolkien directly because I think that says it better than we can do with our own words. And just this is about the comparison and about how he brought his real life experiences into the stories he wrote. So let me just quote a letter to his son. I think it was Christopher. Yes, it was a letter to Christopher, one of his many, many, many letters. So I never called Edith, which was his wife, Lúthien, but she was the source of the story that in time became the chief part of the Silmarillion. It was first conceived in a small woodland glen filled with hemlocks at Ross in Yorkshire, where I was for a brief time in command of an outpost of the Humber garrison, I think that is a newspaper, in 1917, and she was able to live with me for a while. In those days, her hair was raven, her skin clear, her eyes brighter than you have seen them, and she could sing and dance. And I really find this fascinating because everybody who knows the story of Beren and Lúthien, this is basically how they met, right? He met her, and actually, this is the story of how her parents met as well. So you were talking about mirroring, right? And I find it so cool, like his experience with his wife and his description of his wife is the same, like is basically sounds like the same person like Lúthien is, which is super cool,
Yeah, and it's very striking that he was kind of very much enamored of the idea of love at first sight and being struck by the beauty of a person and just having that kind of timeless moment with somebody, which
time stands still.
He captures that with the Melin and Thingol moment, literally with time literally standing still, and then
for years and hundreds of years,
embracing each other for hundreds of years, and the trees growing around them and the stars wheeling overhead, and it's very poetic.
Yes.
And then other times it's more of a metaphor, I think, but still that timeless moment that you have where you just sort of lose yourself.
Yeah, and like the way he portrays Beren and Lúthien in the beginning days, because their love in a way is forbidden. It wasn't heard of before that a human and an elf coupled up and married each other and were together, and they hid in the woods and they didn't really care for conventions and all that. And people who were or who are in love know how that feels. Maybe like other people don't want them to be together, so they create their own little space, and this is what they were doing. And another fun and interesting fact about Beren and Lúthien is that Tolkien himself, so his the priest who took care of his education, he told him
Father Francis,
exactly.
Yeah.
So he told him that he should wait because he met Edith pretty early on in life. They were both really, really young. I think like 17 or something like that, or she was 17. And so his guardian, he told him, no, you have to wait. And they literally waited for 5 years. So you see this very often in the story as well, like with Thingol asking, Beren, he was not like, oh yeah, sure, I give you my daughter's hand in marriage. But he said, this is also the concept of waiting, going on a quest, finding yourself, and then you can come back and marry my daughter. And I think this, obviously it's not the same. Tolkien didn't go and destroy the baddest baddie and brought back a Silmaril.
Well, he did go to war though, it's kind of similar. Sort of.
Yeah. So I find that cool and fascinating. It's not only how they met and how she looks, but there's more to it. And obviously, the story of Beren and Lúthien is not exactly the same like his real life, but it's beautiful that authors bring in their life experience. And it was not about just Christianity and those Christian aspects he brought in, or his experiences in war, but also the factor of love. And I like that. So just to mention, maybe you're here because you found another video series, or I don't know, playlist or whatever it's called, because our friends from Men of the West, Joysten and Matt from Nerd of the Rings, they do we went to a collaboration, and Timbo Tuk, who's an amazing painter, shout out to him. We did this collaboration, and they have dedicated videos to these topics, which are a bit more lore related. We're doing this a bit more freely, talking about various couples and love. So we covered Melian and Thingol and Beren and Lúthien. Let's go to other, and like I said before, the concept of an elf falling in love with a human was very rare. Why? Because humans die. And yes, in the earlier days, in the first age and the second age, the humans, they lived longer lifespans from certain houses. They did, but still, 400 years or 450 years, or let it be 500 years, is still nothing compared to somebody who lives forever. So what do you think? This is my question to you, because the only couples that really came together, and we'll talk about them, were female elves and male humans. And I find this fascinating. And do you think, is there a reason for you? Why was there never, and there is an example, but they never got together. Is there anything behind it? What do you think? Why is it just always a female elf and a male human?
I think it's... Okay. The thing is, it's the way that these couplings seem to happen is that they happen as part of a bloodline. So Tolkien, as many of you will know, was very into noble lineages and royal lines, and it was a monarchist kind of attitude that he had towards this subject, I think. And I think very often it was about the ennoblement of the blood of the royal family that came through the ages, through the line which descended to Eärendil, and his children were Elrond and Elros, and they were the half-elven, and Elros was the first king of Númenor, and then that line eventually went down through the kings of Gondor and Arnor, and then Aragorn was the sort of the inheritor of that line. So I think it's about the ennoblement of that line, and the reason why you see women come into that line and ennoble the line itself is because the emphasis is on the men. He worked out the genealogy of the men because the kings were all men, and I think that's why you see that pattern. Because you see kind of Melian come into the picture early on, and she's basically an angel, and it's like this idea of the divine rule of kings that we get from British history as well. So there's this idea from British history that the line of kings, which is not true, it's pseudo history, but there's this idea that they were descended from Brutus of Troy, who was in turn a descendant of, I think, Aeneas from the Aeneid.
Yes, Aeneas.
So there's that connection that you could draw. So I think that's what he's going for. He's going for this idea of the ennoblement of the royal line. That's how I see it.
But what I find I have 2 points. So what I find fascinating is that most of the time, so let's take 2 examples, right? Let's take Beren and Lúthien, and let's take Idril and Tuor. So who are, just to explain to you, I mean, I think Beren and Lúthien are pretty well known ancestors of Arwen and Aragorn. But there's another couple. So Idril was the daughter of the king of Gondolin, Tuor. So she obviously was from, they were all related to the first High King of the Noldor. And so she is from a royal line. She is a princess of Gondolin. She's a princess of elves. And she would actually inherit, I mean, it's not pretty clear, but he only had 1 child. So maybe she would inherit the throne of Gondolin. And maybe she could also inherit the kingship of all Noldor. You know, she could be. I mean, there was no queen of the Noldor, no high queen.
Turgon, the father, was High King of the Noldor when he died, wasn't he?
He was, exactly. Exactly. So she would be actually the next in line. But, you know, the Noldor never really, they pass it on to brother. So it's not a straight, the eldest child always inherits. That didn't happen.
No. They never really codified the line of succession, or at least Tolkien never wrote about it, if they did.
No. Yeah.
So it
passed from cousin to, and then, you know, because somebody was grateful, and then they passed it to another house. So that obviously they were all related, but it was not always the eldest child. Sometimes the cousin got it, and this is how Tuor actually got it, because his father, you know, like, whatever. There are too many. These family trees are crazy. All the F's, all the F names in that family tree. But yes, what I wanted to say. So Idril obviously was of royal blood. She was very high up in that line. And then came a man. Obviously, Tuor was, in a way, he was not a prince of man. That was actually his cousin. Túrin would have inherited that from his father, who was the eldest, Hur. But the thing is, you know, he was not a. Are you literally drinking wine?
I'm literally drinking wine. Yeah.
I just want to. Sorry, people. It's 2 p.m. But okay, go for it. It's the weekend. TGIF. Okay. Yes. So back to our couples. So he was, you know, very. He was like a nobleman, but he was not a prince, right? And it was unheard of that somebody like that, being also a human, would marry into an elven royal line. And yeah, that is, I mean, yes, he was a nobleman. He, you know, he was from a very good family, let's say it like that. But it's weird. And it's the same for Beren and Lúthien, right? Beren, I mean, he even had the ring of Bara here. This is the ring that then later Aragorn has. This ring literally survived everything. The downfall of Númenor, this ring went through space and time, basically. But yes, he could prove he is from, again, a noble house. But he is nothing compared to the daughter of the king of Doriath. Who was one of the firstborn elves as well, you know? So it is, in a way, weird that these men were obviously lower in rank, let's say that, compared to the elven princesses they married.
Yes. You wonder whether that was going back to Tolkien's own life and how he saw his wife, really, don't you? As somebody who was, you know, above him. He saw her as being better than him, and saw himself as almost not quite worthy in some way, or that he was blessed by being in her life, I suppose.
And I do think, you know, for a lot of these royal houses, the question would have been then if they would marry another prince from, let's say, the same status. If Idril would have married, I don't know, whoever, one of the 7 sons of Fëanor or whoever, who was a prince, then maybe, you know, or even the king in waiting or the king, then that other king would take on the kingship there. And it's so, you know, it is, I'm not sure if Tolkien really thought that deep about this, and I don't want to, you know, talk too much about this, but I find it interesting. And I also find it interesting that I do think why is there no human female falling in love or getting, there was one, and we'll talk about her now, but I think it is because of the aging thing. I do think it is, in a way, and this is our society, and it's not right. I'm not saying this is a good thing, but this is, I think, in the time of Tolkien, how people thought. It is about, women grow old, and there's just a certain amount of time where they can have children and all that,
and men get more distinguished,
like a fine wine, like the wine Dan is drinking. Yes, no, but
I don't think the wine I'm drinking is very distinguished, to be honest.
Oh my God. So no recommendation from Dan. No, but I really do think that also played into it, because yes, the men grew older, but they could still have children and father children, and take care of these somebody to produce somebody to inherit the line and the title, and women can't, and they grow old, and I really do think that was also the problem, because then you would have like an immortal elf, a male elf, and then she dies 60, 70, 120, whatever. I think
technically that would happen either way, though, wouldn't it? But it is reflective of how society sees men and women, I think, or at least certainly in Tolkien's time.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and I do think this is why we don't have that. But we have one couple, and we can talk about them. And this is actually, I talked about concepts of love, right? And I think this is really tragic, actually. And it is such a beautiful story. And this character takes part in one of the coolest dialogues, and I promise people I'll make a video about that one day, but it's really, really complicated, this topic. It's from the Atrabeth, Andreth Finrod, the King Finrod, the elf, and a mortal woman called Andreth, and she was in love with, oh my gosh, I always mix up the names.
Was it Angrod or Idril? One of the two.
Yes, one of the two. And so it is really sad and tragic. And they actually wanted to marry Egnor. It's Egnor.
That's Agnor, okay.
Yeah, so he was a son of Finarfin, one of the sons. And they wanted to marry, and they fall in love. And this is the only time a female human and a male elf did fall in love, what we know of. And they wanted to marry, and they couldn't, because now we come to some laws of the elves. You can't marry in wartime, during wartime, or you shouldn't. I mean, but then I'm like, there was literally always a war going on, first, second, third age. So when did these elves marry? But okay.
I know. Well, I guess they all married in Valinor before they left.
But the ones who are born and later on, know,
I mean, they just got to wait until Morgoth is taken care of.
Well, they found their little spot in between Sauron and Morgoth. So when they found that spot, then the churches were really, really busy.
When this story happened, just to place it in the timeline as well, this was during the siege of Angband. So this was when, I don't know if we know the exact year, but we probably do, but I don't know. But I think it was later on in the Siege of Angband. So after the mortals show up, probably later than when the Eöl storyline takes place, I think. But before the Dagor Bragolak.
Yes, before that. Yep. Yeah. So, end of stories, they couldn't marry. She died, but to honor her and their love, and this is really cool and beautiful. And we have a lot of examples like that. He never married. He never married another elf or human or whatever. He never married, and again, they are immortal. So he lived a very, very long life, without love.
It's a story of unrequited love, but not totally one in one direction, because he treasured her memory, and
he did.
He took her with him to Valinor with him, and kept her in his heart, which is really, really, really touching.
It is, yes, it's beautiful.
And actually, I have the section of the Athrabeth dog-eared here if we want to read.
Yes, read it. Cool.
I'm going to try and read this without crying, because this is literally, it's one of the most emotive pieces of writing that Tolkien ever put on the page, I think.
Yes,
and also one of the most thought-provoking as well, because the whole thing is very philosophical too.
It is.
But I'm just going to read the end of it, which touches on the issue of love. So
yeah, because the whole thing is mainly about mortality versus immortality, and that humans and elves don't really get the other side. And it's amazing and interesting. And what you say, you really start understanding a lot of things Tolkien is describing in his works. Yeah.
Yeah, well, he wrote this. He wrote this piece after The Lord of the Rings, but it was written in order that he could figure out how this issue had been affected by the writing of The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
So it was like a thought experiment for him in many ways.
It is. Yeah.
It's like some of the other stuff that you read in Morgoth's Ring, which didn't make it into the published Silmarillion, like the Miriel stuff as well.
Oh my God! Yes, we can talk about that later.
Yeah, that's another sort of love gone wrong story.
Very wrong.
Very, very wrong. Yeah. So here we go. This is just the last paragraph or so, really. Darkness fell in the room. He took her hand in the light of the fire. "Whither go you?" she said. So this is Finrod and Andreth. "North away," he said, "to the swords and the siege and the walls of defence, that yet for a while in Beleriand rivers may run clean, leaves spring, and birds build their nests ere night comes. Will he be there, bright and tall, and the wind in his hair? Tell him not to be reckless, not to seek danger beyond need." "I will tell him," said Finrod, "but I might as well tell thee not to weep. He is a warrior, Andreth, and a spirit of wrath. In every stroke that he deals, he sees the enemy who long ago did thee this hurt. But you are not for Arda. Whither you go, may you find light. Await us there, my brother and me." So he's saying, wherever you go after death, wait for us there, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it gives a new layer of meaning to the Beren and Lúthien storyline in some ways as well.
Yes.
The story of how they, were separated by the mortal veil and separated by the ocean, literally, as well.
And you can, with a last thought on the Beren and Lúthien story, because the thing is, she was actually an immortal, and when she went to the halls of Mandos, she was so sad, and she sang this epic sad song that in the end she convinced the gods or the demigods or however you want to call them to bring her back to life and bring Beren back to life and give them one short life, but still alive together. And again, that's unheard of. So you can see that the topic of seeing people, obviously they did good deeds, they helped to destroy the evil, but still I think it was also the love aspect of her being so sad about losing the love of her life. So they brought her back because they they understood her and they were like, okay, yeah, you can have that last 200 years or however long they lived together.
Well, she sang a song to Mandos, didn't she? She sang a song of lamentation, which it sort of wonderfully kind of echoes the music of the Ainur in some ways. Because there's a line in the music of the Ainur about this, and I think almost the two probably are almost certainly like directly related in terms of why that line exists in the Ainur Lindale. I don't remember the line off the top of my head, but it also of course links to Nienor, and then later when you read about Nienor and what her powers are and what her kind of aspect is of her power, and that she teaches Gandalf the sort of the ideas about compassion and pity and so on. It all ties in with the big theme in the Legendarium, which is this idea of lamentation and mourning and but then finding the hope in that, and that storyline gave hope to the elves. It gave them new hope in their long war against Morgoth. So it's, we say that this is a story of love, but it's still a story about war. It's still the ongoing story between good and evil. Yeah.
Yay.
But as for these two, I mean, the Andreth and Finrod story, as we've said, read it if you haven't read it, because it's wonderful. Morgoth's Ring is probably, I think, most Tolkienists' favourite book in the history of Middle Earth series in general, and that's the standout. So definitely worth reading. If you've read the Silmarillion and want to know what to read next, I'd definitely recommend that.
And it's just a few. The Athrabeth is just a few pages. It's not that much. Yes, and it's not super hard to read. You can understand it. You should know the Silmarillion to know this stuff, because it doesn't make sense just to know the Lord of the Rings. You're like, who are these people? Yes, cool. So we talked about that. There are other examples. So I think Tuor and Idril and the whole Gondolin theme, which is going on, is so interesting. And I think my Twitter handle is I'd rather be in Gondolin, and that is 100% true. But I do find some of the most intriguing love stories, or stories about love, or couples are in the Fall of Gondolin, because you do think elves have this perfect life together, and they marry, you stay together for life. Sometimes they don't see each other for centuries, but they end up together. No, that's not always the case, and this is very knowing that Tolkien was a Christian, devoted Christian, and I don't think like divorce and stuff like that and separation was a thing he wanted to portray in his work, but he did.
I think actually he was very much against the idea of divorce. As a Catholic, you'd imagine he would be. I think there was a story that I heard once about, I don't quote me on this, but I think there was a story about him actually like losing a friend because of the idea of divorce. Because he fell out with somebody over this issue.
Okay, So
sorry,
no, I do think this was against his teachings, but he included it in the story, right? And so the story is the following. So the King of Gondolin's sister, one of my favorite characters, Dora the Explorer. No, her name was Aredhel, and she is amazing. And she was bored to death in that beautiful city, and she wanted to explore Middle Earth and to maybe also find love. And so she went on a journey, on a trip, and now comes something very weird. And whenever I read that quote, I don't have the quote here, we don't need to read it, but you can look it up. But it is very strange, and it mirrors in a way the Melian and Thingol thing, but also in a negative way, the enchantment of two people meeting each other and falling in love. But this is the negative version of it, because this is about her then husband. Spoiler, they married. So this is the dark elf Eöl. And now dark is, in this case, he really is, well, I mean, evil. He's not evil, but he is.
He's pretty evil.
He's not the happiest chap
no, he's not.
in the world. And so he is also related, I do think, how close, I don't know, but he's related to Thingol, and he lives in the woods of Nan Elmoth, and he has something like a mansion, castle, whatever there, and he's the master of that area. He's also a very renowned smith. He's very close to the dwarves, unheard of. We know the Noldor were once in a while close to the dwarves, but he's a Teleri. Because he's related to Thingol, so he must be a Teleri. And he stayed back in Middle-earth. We don't know how old he is or anything, but he is called the Dark Elf. And this stands, I do think, he prefers literally darkness. He doesn't, he likes, to stay indoors, to be in the woods. He's a very gloomy character. And he's not, I don't think he's evil per se, but he's very obsessive as well.
No, he's not evil with a capital E. He's not. He's not working for the enemy or anything. But
no. Well,
but
his
he's
son
he's
later is.
well, true. But that's another story. Yeah, and his son is even a wonderfully complicated character too. I think
Oh my God, yes.
because I think Eöl abuses him essentially, and that's why he turns out the way he does. But that's a whole other story.
I do think he turns out the way he does because of his parents and because of their problems and because of these two houses that got mingled and probably shouldn't, because of the hatred. Because literally Eöl hated the Noldor, and he even says that. But then he falls in love, or whatever he does, with with the sister of the king of the Noldor. So they met, and it is said that he kind of enchants her. But again, I find that very weird. It is like she is under his spell, and obviously she's very beautiful and all that. But the way Tolkien talks about this is not in
it's a grey area. He enchants her so that he makes it impossible for her to leave. I think is
exactly.
how they
He traps her.
He kind of traps her. He manipulates her, and he uses illusions to make it impossible for her to leave the forest.
Yeah,
which she eventually breaks free of his entrapment. But it also does say that she was not entirely unwilling.
No, she was not. That's
and that she was also happy for a time as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because she escaped, she founded her own little kingdom. I think this is what she wanted, but she wanted her own thing. She didn't want to be just the sister to the king, I think that is clear that she was happy for a while, and they had a son, the just mentioned Meglin, and they were happy for a while, but then something super tragic happens, and the thing is now comes into play what I was talking about. They were two houses literally hating each other. King Thingol was totally against the Noldor princes coming to Middle-earth, taking over Middle-earth, and so was Eöl.
And he was even more extreme than his king was,
He was way more extreme, and he kind of blamed them for Melkor coming back to Middle-earth, which was actually not true, because Melkor came first and then the Noldor came.
Yeah, he kind of had a point though too.
He had a point. I know. He had a point. But then also the Noldor had a point and said, without our help and without our armies, he would literally overrun you. So there are two sides of the story. But still, those two didn't get along. And this is very unheard of in Tolkien, that elves fall out of love, right? And I do think what he hints at is, she would have, if there was divorce, I think she would have divorced him, because she literally fled with her son from her husband when he was gone. And they arrived back in Gondolin. This is a super cool story. It's one of my favorite parts of the story, when they reach the 7 gates of Gondolin and blah, blah. So she goes back home with her son, who never saw Gondolin. And she pleads with her brother and asks, okay, can we stay for a while? And obviously he agrees. There's one rule in Gondolin, that if you come to Gondolin, you're not allowed to leave ever again. So you can't spill the secret of like, where is Gondolin, because it's a hidden city. So the enemy can't find the city. And they stay, but Eöl does find them. And he comes to Gondolin, and fast forward this, he wants to kill his son, which is again elves killing their children, because the son refuses to go back with him, and he wants to stay in Gondolin with his mother and his family. And he wants to kill his son. The wife, Aredhel, she jumps in front of Meglin and he hits her with the knife, hits her chest or wherever, and she dies in the end. So he kills his wife. Well, not, it was not jumping at her and killing her on purpose, but in the end, he killed his wife. Then he gets killed himself, blah, 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 blah. So, it is interesting that Tolkien includes this kind of failed marriage and this attempt of a woman fleeing from her husband with her child. That is, if you know the Lord of the Rings books, you're like, what? Elves do that? That is very...
Yeah, it's
strange.
disturbing. It's disturbing if you don't know the story, isn't it? For sure.
It is, yes.
I remember reading that for the first time and thinking, "Geez,
Yeah, same.
this is
Yeah, and
not the elves of tra la la
no,
lolly that I'm used
no,
to." you know.
those are not
Um,
those ones. No, and something weird happens after this because the son of said couple, Meglin, I do think he had a really bad upbringing with these arguing parents. Just a little mini excursion. We have a very similar topic in the Numenorian stories with the Numenorian kings, because there was also a story of Aldarion and Eärendil, the first sea king of the Numenorians, and his wife, and they grew apart.
I didn't think that was where you were going, but carry on.
But I don't want to talk about just
Carry
men.
on.
Yeah. So they grew apart, and they just had one daughter who also then was like, oh, I don't like men. My father was never there. My mother never got along with my father. So again, Tolkien tells a story of an unhappy couple. In the end, that woman even kills herself. Again, unheard of. And you are like, Tolkien wrote that? Yes, he did.
I thought you were going for Tar Miriel, the queen who was married to Ar-Pharazôn at the end, because that was another unwilling woman who was forced into marriage.
Yes, yeah, definitely. No, I want to tell the story about Idril and Meglin, and how Tolkien disliked love and lust and desire, and especially with close relatives, because Meglin was the cousin of Idril, said Idril, who is the daughter of the king of Gondolin, and he fall in love with her. But obviously this is a weird kind of love and very disturbing, as he is her first cousin, and obviously Tolkien didn't want that to happen, but yeah, he fell in love with his cousin, and he actually gave the enemy Morgoth, but he helped him to destroy Gondolin in the end for the price of the girl and the city, because Morgoth promised him that he can have the girl and he can have the city, or what's left of the city, if he helps him. So this is really, again, love gone really, really wrong, love amongst elves, and he...
So happy Valentine's Day is what.
Happy Valentine's Day. No, we'll talk about happy things. We'll end this with.
I think we should end on a happy one. Yeah, let's end on Eärendil in a minute.
Yes. Yeah. No, but yeah, I find it. This is what I just want to say. I find it super fascinating. That there are other forms of. It's not like Arwen and Aragorn. Somebody giving up immortality to be with a man they love. There are other examples of failed love, of unfulfilled love, of lust, of desire, in Tolkien's works, especially the Silmarillion and the other works besides Lord of the Rings. Because I do think the Lord of the Ring couples, Eowyn and Aragorn, you get over it because she gets the man in the end who really fits her and what she wants. And yeah, I don't think those topics he brought into the Lord of the Ring books, but he mentioned these topics like killing yourself. Let's mention this to make it super sad, people. There's another couple where literally brother and sister marry. Shout out to Túrin Turambar, the guy I hate most in the story. I love to hate most, let's say it like that. So
yeah,
what happened?
I think you really enjoy the character, don't you? Because I think
I do.
Children of Húrin is your favourite work, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think you said before.
Yeah. So tell us what happened in a short.
Okay, so Túrin Turambar is a mortal man who was the son of Tuor, who was of the house of which house are they from? The
Beor.
Are they?
I think so.
I thought they were from. No, they're from the
one
House of Hador.
The three original.
They're from the House of Hador, I think.
Hador? Yeah. One of the three original houses of men.
One of the three original houses of men, the Edain. And his father, Húrin, was he was captured by Morgoth in the Nirnaeth Arnoediad, and Morgoth tortured Húrin for information because he wanted to find the previously mentioned city of Gondolin, the hidden city that we were just talking about. And Húrin knew the location of it. And rather than tell him what he wanted to know, he gave him some sass, basically. It's a brilliant sequence of dialogue that we get in the beginning of Children of Húrin,
so good,
where he literally just throws it back in his face and tells him, you can do what you want to me, but you won't get any information out of me. And he's loyal. So Morgoth curses him and turns him to stone, kind of, and puts him up in a high chair on the side of Thangorodrim. And he's cursed to watch his children fail and suffer and live horrible lives.
And his house failing and
falls apart. So he witnesses the downfall of his house and his children and their tragic lives. And what happens to Túrin Turambar is later on in the story, he is he meets his sister for the first time, who's never met before, who basically he doesn't know who she is because he's never met her, and she was
born after he was gone.
Yeah, exactly. And she has her memory wiped temporarily by the dragon Glaurung, who is the father of dragons. And
we have a cool stream about him.
We do, yeah. One of our best ones is a 2-hour stream on Glaurung. So do check that out. And so what happens is is a case of mistaken identity where they don't know that they're brother and sister, and they kind of fall in love. Túrin is kind of, he's already been affected by his tragic life, and he's kind of.
And he had another sad love story before, because an elven, the daughter of the king of Nargothrond, an elf, fell in love with him, but he rejected her.
Yeah, another tragic, unrequited love story.
What's happening, people?
Happy Valentine's Day once again. But there we go. But yeah, that's Túrin Turambar. He what happens is he marries his sister Nienor, and he makes her pregnant, and she's pregnant with his child when they both tragically die at the end of the story.
Well, that's what I was hinting at. She also killed herself.
Which
again, and he kills himself.
And then he kills himself. Very, Romeo and Juliet ending.
Yes.
All right, you say Romeo and Juliet, but it's inspired by the story of Kalervo from the Finnish Kalevala. Yeah. Somebody was actually asking me about this the other day. A cool question. I answered it in private to somebody. About the story of Kalervo, which Tolkien wrote a version of, which has now been published, I think, about 10 years ago.
It is very similar to Kalervo's story. But again, Tolkien, the Christian, saying that people are people choose to end their lives. So we have a few examples here now, and it is, obviously it's wartime and there are other influences, but it's due to love gone wrong as well. So often, it is in the Númenórean story part of Aldarion and Eärendil when she kills herself, and it's wow. If you don't know the whole legendarium, you're like, again, Tolkien wrote this. Wow, he did go there. It's elves, it's humans. So love can be tragic, but let's end this on a on a positive note, people, because everybody who knows me, I'm the positive, cheerful person, and Dan as well. Well, mostly.
Some of the time, yeah.
Sometimes he's grumpy cat. So who do you want to end on? Who's a super
I said it before, let's do Eärendil and Elwing, because I like those two. There's not loads of information about their relationship, like their interpersonal relationship, but it's a cool story.
It is.
Two characters that look out for each other and have each other's backs and have a lot of adventures together. So,
and who are the founders of a super important lineage going on? Yeah.
Eärendil is literally, he's like the kind of messiah of the First Age, who's this sort of almost prophesied figure who shows up at the end, and what happens is he has a Silmaril, which is the same Silmaril that Beren and Lúthien were able to take from Angband, and
it's an inheritance then from that line.
Yeah, exactly. The sons of Feanor go after it
because they swore an oath to.
Yeah, so they're trying to fulfill their oath to their father that they took way back in chapter 9 of the Silmarillion. And what happens is they, just to skip to the adventure part, they end up going and sailing to Valinor with the Silmaril, and Elwing. She's lost at sea, but then she turns into a bird and flies the Silmaril to him, and then they sail there together. And we don't really know what happens to her at the end, do we? I don't know. I mean,
well, he's guarding the doors of the night because in the end, Morgoth get captured in the War of Wrath. So the host of the good was successful, and they capture the baddie of the First Ages, the former boss of Sauron, and they capture him. And Eärendil, with his flying ship Vingelot, is the one. And I assume that she is on there in the form of either the bird or whatever, or with him.
You'd like to think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think they're together.
Wouldn't make sense for her to be in Valinor. It would make more sense for her to be with him on the ship.
Yeah, I think they're together.
I don't know if it's ever stated, though. At least it's not in the Silmarillion.
People in the comments will tell us. They are cleverer than we are.
Yeah, if you know what happened to Elwing, let us know. Maybe I'll research that after this, actually.
Yeah, but it's cool because, again, like you said, somebody is sacrificing and wants to give up, and he as well, because the thing is, for her, he chooses immortality. I think he would rather have his son, and you see that playing out in his son later on, and because they had twin sons, again, super tragic. They can't be there to see their sons growing up. And so literally the enemy is raising their two twin boys, their children, which is Elrond and Elros. And one of the boys chooses mortality and become the first Númenórean king. And I really do think that he would have chosen the mortality route.
I think the Silmarillion does say that. It says that he chose immortality because he wanted to make the same choice as her. Because they both have that choice, technically, because they're both half-elven.
Yeah, exactly. So this is cool, because he gives up this thing that obviously, yes, it is an important life choice, and he gives it up for her to be with her for eternity. And I really do think this is then the concept he gives them wherever they are guarding the doors of the night, where Melkor was cast, and I do think they're together there. That would be my idea.
Yeah. I mean, the Silmarillion does definitely say that he chooses immortality to be with her, so it wouldn't make sense for her to not be there too. But
well, I mean, other things happened in Tolkien. So that is a really cool story. And yes, something positive to end this. But I do think overall, for me, somebody also like Melian and Thingol, and you would think, an angel, or whatever you want to call the Maiar, very powerful angel, and yes, obviously Thingol was powerful because he was the king of the Teleri, him and his brother all were, but they're not the same as angels, so she fall in love with him, and they founded this line of Arwen and Aragorn, and there's also this magic aspect always in that line because she was a magic being, and I really like that he did put in that love story and woven in this magic aspect, and then this magic being taught to generations after that, and the healing power and all that stuff that comes from Melian. And this is super, super interesting and cool that it's not just elves and men, but there are other beings, woven into the story. But again, it's not like Ents and hobbits, or hobbits, not even, hobbits and men. Maybe the concept, I've never gone too deep into the concept of hobbits. I don't know if there were men.
Hobbits, let's finish on hobbits weirdly, shall we? So hobbits, in the Hobbit, it's mentioned that the Took family were rumoured to have taken fairy wives, I think is the phrase that it uses, meaning elven women. And certainly we know that the Took family did have adventures with the elves over the course of several generations once they met Gandalf. So it's not impossible that rumour may have had some truth to it.
The height difference,
well, look at the real world.
I know.
How tall like Peter Dinklage's wife? I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
maybe. I mean, there are other examples, like the father of Denethor's wife, Boromir and Faramir's ancestors from their mother's line was an elf as well, from the princess of Dol Amroth, the founder of the house, married an elf.
That was the sort of servant of Nimrodel. Mithrales, I think.
Yeah. So the founder of that line was an like half elven, half human.
Yeah, she married the founder of the House of the Princes of Dol Amroth, whose name was Imrazor, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. Super cool story as well. I want to one day make a video. I have such a long list about videos, but yes, I want to talk about that as well. Yeah, so we covered a few couples. We covered tragedy. We covered happy couples. We covered we covered people giving up things for the other. And I think this is the tone and tonality, how I see this. Yes, obviously, that there is this tragedy, but even in tragedy, like giving up immortality, lies in the end happiness for these couples. And I think that is the positive thing you can take from that, that giving up your statues, your maybe claim to a royal title or whatever for love, giving up
the self-sacrifice is rewarded in some ways, isn't it? And that tragic element does come back around in many ways, except for Túrin, who is given a very hard time on his channel at times, I would say, but
I know. Maybe one day somebody can come and redeem. I think it will be Yoyston. Shout out to you. And he can redeem Túrin. But I have my opinions about that, and I do think Tolkien wants to teach us a lesson of how not to do things and how not to be influenced by other people telling you this is your destiny, and by a Dark Lord cursing you. You should be like, F you, Dark Lord. I do it anyway, and I do it the right way, but he didn't. So this is my take on this. But, I've never met Tolkien and could ask him the question. But if I could meet Tolkien, I would ask him that question.
Is that the question you would ask?
Yes, I want to ask him, what did you want to teach me with the character of Túrin? That would be what would be your question?
I am actually with you on the Túrin question, to be honest. I'd give you a hard time about it because it's funny, but actually Labadal, is it Labadal, the guy?
Labadal, the guy working for the
Yeah, so at the beginning of that story, there's a character who he's a servant of the House of Húrin, who I think he's like a carpenter who has like a lame leg because he had an accident in battle or something.
I think Labadal means one-legged or something like that, even.
Probably, like every name in Tolkien basically describes the key aspects of the character, doesn't it? Yep. So probably.
Or your fate.
But he has a quote at the beginning of the story where he says, how does he put it? That the man who runs away from his fate may find the shortcut to it, or something like that. Which I think is basically foreshadowing the entire storyline. So yes, I think you're right about the fate aspect of Túrin's life.
Yeah.
God, we've talked about Túrin too much.
It always happens on my channel. So being sidetracked is totally fine. I had Chris on here, and we wanted to talk about one topic, Chris from the Philosopher's Games, and we ended up talking very, very various topics. But that's totally fine. I think people are okay with that. There's a lot to talk about. But yes, overall, I do think to round this up, I like the idea that this is not just about war, and even in wartime, love and pity, because pity is in our world a very negative word, but it was not for Tolkien at Tolkien's time. Pity meant something completely different. And yeah, pity is what you said, what Nienor taught Gandalf, for example. And it is important, to take care of people and to sacrifice sometimes things you have, and that is all for me under that roof of love, because love is not just lust and all that and being together. Love is various things. So I really like that. And I do think he portrays this in a way, it's not cheesy. It's not, this is always my comparison. Like, I don't need bed scenes to know people love each other, because my comparison always is Han and Leia, because in Star Wars, you never see, love playing out in that very... like people having sex or whatever, right? You just she says, "I love you," and he says, "I know," and there's not really much more to it. But this is one of the coolest moments and greatest love stories, right? And you don't need always visualizations of that stuff or so many words. Sometimes that is enough, and I really do think that is how the love between couples in Tolkien works as well. And I find that cool, and I find that that is exactly right for these books and for that world. And I'm fine with that. I don't need a description of Arwen and Aragorn on a super deeper level. I'm fine with that.
No, they'd leave that to the /fiction writers.
Oh my God, yes. Many of them. Yay, cool. Well, how would you round this up? What are your thoughts?
So yeah, just what you've said, really. Just the morals that we can take from the different stories, and how important the theme is, and what we can learn from the different characters, and the way that we see love, selfless love, rewarded with good karma, and kind of the way that it's portrayed in Tolkien is really important, and it's wholesome, and it's something that we can all take in our own lives and learn from. And and then when we look at the tragic cases of unnatural love and those sorts of storylines, we see the other side of that coin as well.
I do.
And so there's a lot we can learn from a lot of it. In some ways, I think Tolkien was a man of his times on some of these issues, and we've touched on that a little bit too. So there's a limit to what kind of things I would take from it for my own life, but.
No, I know, but it's good that he included topics like, women leaving their men because they're not happy. It's cool, even though, he wrote all this in the 50s, 60s, some of the stories 1925 or whenever, they're really... That was another time, people. That was almost 100 years ago, but he still included some of these topics, which happened even at that time. And I really like that it's not, like... Puritan beliefs of love is just this: female, men, marriage, children, happiness. No, it's not. And I really like that he included that, especially in the Silmarillion, and had time for that.
And how much time he put into revising some of these stories as well is really important. We talked with on my channel, we talked with Professor Olsen about this, didn't we? About how he it's put a lot of effort, and how it's very noticeable how he put a lot of effort into including more women's storylines the more that he rewrote the Legendarium. So especially after the Lord of the Rings stuff, he went back and changed a lot of stuff which didn't make it into the published Silmarillion, but it's really noticeable that he was really kind of trying to make this fit with his new worldview as he'd become more learned in life and had learnt a lot from his own life and having children.
And a daughter, he had a daughter who at that time grew up and experienced all these things herself. And I do think that changed his POV.
For sure. So that's my take on the topic anyway. And thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Of course. So Dan, what's to end this? What is up next on your channel? Because people, I think, got the notion that you know the Silmarillion quite well, and that is because Dan is going through the Silmarillion chapter by chapter and explaining it. So if you're like, oh my God, I can't be bothered to read this book, which I totally get you, people. Go to Dan's channel and just hear him talk you through if you have problems reading it, or if you just want to read along, or if you have some questions left after you read it.
Yeah, especially if you have questions. I love answering questions. Yeah. I'm starting to prepare my Q&A segment. So every few chapters, I have a kind of recap on what we've been through and go back on people's questions and drop some additional lore on top of the stuff that we've covered in the course of the book. But I'm up to chapter 13. I've just had some new voice actors come in. So one thing that I do on my channel, for those who don't know, is I have people come in and voice little bits of dialogue. You've done Yavanna. You were the first person on my channel on the Silmarillion Explained stuff, anyway.
Yeah.
To come in and voice a weird German demigod, and I've just had Yoyston and Memory Troll, Yoyston from Men of the West, and Memory Troll voicing Thingol and Maedhros, respectively. So
that was really cool. Yay! Yeah, so you continue the Silmarillion.
Yeah, so I'll be continuing that and working on getting some more podcast guests in as well at some point soon, hopefully. I actually want to do a little plug. I want to do I haven't confirmed it yet, but I want to do a podcast on the Athrobeth, which we read from earlier.
Yes.
At some point with some guests who I'm going to try and reach out to in the next few days. So hopefully I'll be able to do that with them. But I'm not going to announce it because I haven't confirmed yet.
Yay. And I love that part. And it's so interesting, and it tells you so much about, this, and I think this is the one of the biggest problems all these characters have. This is the mortality versus immortality, and this will play such an important role in the Second Age with what we will see on Amazon Prime, because this really, was the cause, one of the causes of the downfall of Numenor. And cool, interesting. I like that for my channel. Things like this will happen more, lore videos as well. Yes, a lot of content to come. I'm putting out videos like a lot recently. I hope that will continue. Thank you for everyone who stayed with us. Again, happy Valentine's Day, whatever day.
Make sure you smash the like button as well on this video if you're still watching.
Yes, and leave a comment. Whatever day it is for you, again, love, hate it or love it. I think it is important, and we should celebrate it every day, yes, but sometimes it's nice to have a reminder to do that. Cool. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, my lovelies, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye, lovelies.